Hello friends! Did you know that domestic violence can have a significant impact on divorce cases? In many cases, it is the key factor in determining how a divorce is settled, especially when it comes to cases that have child custody and alimony or spousal support issues. So today, we're going to talk about how domestic violence impacts divorce cases. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. To understand how domestic violence works, it may be helpful to explain the cycle of violence, which has three separate phases. The first phase is what's called the tension building phase. During this phase, there's a gradual increase in tension and hostility between the parties and the individuals involved. There may be arguments, threats, other forms of verbal abuse, and the victim may begin to feel anxious, scared, fearful, or on edge. This is then followed by the second phase, which is the acute or violent phase. This is the phase where the actual violence occurs. This may be physical, emotional, or sexual in nature, and it can range from minor acts of aggression to very serious forms of abuse or assault. This is then followed by the third phase, which is the honeymoon phase. After the violent phase occurs, there may be a period of calm where the perpetrator may apologize, promise to change, try to make amends with the victim. This in turn may cause the victim to have a false sense of hope or security that everything's going to be okay, but it is often very short-lived and can quickly lead back to the tension building phase. So as you can see, it begins to be a loop and it starts to repeat. It is also important to note that domestic violence can take on many different forms, including the following. The first of which is physical abuse. This includes the use of any type of physical force that causes harm or bodily injury, such as hitting, slapping, punching, kicking, choking, or using a weapon. The next form is what's called sexual abuse. This includes any unwanted sexual contact, including forced sexual activity, rape, and sexual coercion. The third example is what's called emotional abuse. This includes any behavior that is designed to manipulate or control a partner's emotions or sense of self-worth, such as threats, intimidation, or isolating them from friends and family. The fourth example is what's called financial abuse. This may include behavior that is designed to control the other partner's ability to have access to money and other financial resources, including not allowing the partner to leave the house to go to work, not allowing the partner to have access to bank accounts, including their own individual accounts or the joint accounts. The fifth example is what's called psychological abuse. This includes any behavior that is designed to undermine the other partner's mental health or mental well-being. Examples of this include gaslighting, constant criticism, or engaging in behavior that is humiliating to that partner. All of these examples of domestic violence have a long-lasting impact on a victim's life, and they can definitely be taken into consideration when a court is considering a divorce and custody settlement. Florida Statute 741.28 defines what domestic violence is in the state of Florida, and it defines it as any assault, battery, sexual battery, stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any other criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death of one family or household member by another family or household member. Those terms are meant to include any spouse or former spouse, any person related by blood or marriage, any persons who are presently residing together as if a family or who have resided together in the past, and persons who have a child in common, regardless of whether they have ever been married or lived together. So what happens if there is an incident of domestic violence? Well, most of the time, sadly, these incidents are not reported to the authorities. But in the event that the authorities are called, there is usually an arrest, and that person will, at least in Florida, spend the night in jail. Subsequent to this, the victim may consider filing what's called a petition for an injunction for protection against domestic violence. A lot of people call that a restraining order. So let's talk about how all of this may affect divorce cases. Remember that if a divorce case is filed while there is a pending domestic violence case, then that order will definitely affect the status quo order. Specifically, if the victim is allowed to have the children in the domestic violence case, then the family court may not change that automatically. In addition to this, the domestic violence orders often will give the victim 100% custody with the children. At that point, the victim may also be granted what's called exclusive use of the house as part of the injunction. So it's important to see how the injunction and the divorce cases intertwine with each other. Remember that a lot of times the victims sometimes may not have a place to stay, so it's important to think about housing. They don't have a safe place to stay, so we must keep that in mind as well. Speaking to the equitable distribution side of this issue, a lot of times the spouse who is a victim of domestic violence may not necessarily be aware of the finances of the parties. So it is very important for those spouses to make sure that they enlist some help to make sure that they know what the full marital estate is. Just because they don't know doesn't mean that they will not get their share of the marital estate. Remember that Florida, it is an equitable distribution state. Court is a court of equity or fairness. So a lot of times the victims of domestic violence may actually get awarded the home, especially if there's children involved, so that they can stabilize themselves and their children. Another aspect may be on the alimony issue. Victims of domestic violence may need certain types of alimony, including bridge the gap alimony, which is for a short period of time to allow them to be transitioned into the life of being single, perhaps rehabilitative alimony so that they can get some educational credits or some training so that they can be self-sufficient. And then obviously durational or permanent alimony may be something that they are entitled to as well. While the court case is pending, the parties that have a domestic violence case involved or intertwined with the family court case may be involved in some of the therapeutic aspects of family court. The victim of the domestic violence may be required or may be offered to go to counseling so that they can start the healing process. The abuser may be required to attend an anger control course or therapy as well. And obviously the children, if they were privy or aware of what was going on, then they would be referred to therapy also. On the child custody side, this is probably where the domestic violence has the most indelible impact on the proceedings. In Florida, statute 61.13, there are factors that contemplate whether or not there's domestic violence in the case. Specifically, the statute reads that evidence of domestic violence, sexual violence, child abuse, child abandonment, or child neglect will be considered. On the flip side, if there's false allegations of domestic violence, those will also be considered by the court. So we have to make sure that if this is an issue, there's corroborating evidence of the issue and that we aren't making statements that may not be able to be proved at a later date. In closing, domestic violence is one of these issues that is paramount and very prevalent in a lot of communities out there. Those of you that are watching that are victims of domestic violence, I want you to know that there are a lot of people that are willing to help you. The law also provides protections, including the ability to get a restraining order or an injunction, some police policies regarding reporting. So if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, whether nationwide or here in Florida, it is very important that you seek help and support from law enforcement, domestic violence shelters, or advocates or other community services as soon as possible. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, it's 1-800-799-7233 or 1-800-799 and it spells the word SAFE. We are definitely one of the firms that handles this type of case. You can have them look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Please do us a favor and like this video, subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast, and share this video with anyone who may be going through a domestic violence case and may find this information helpful. Thank you.